Hey, everybody, welcome back to another episode of The Tactical Leader. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Nate Sampson, and we're going to talk about how he helps business owners create a legacy through the lens. Before we begin, I'll remind you this show is brought to you by Nightly Productions. If you're ready to discover, share, and embrace your voice, head over to nightly.productions to find out how we can help you do exactly that and create the tactical content that delivers. Again, that's nightly.productions. Nate, welcome to the show, my friend.
Hey, Zach, thanks for having me, man. Great podcast, great show. Glad to be a part of it.
Man, I'm super stoked about it because I think we got a lot of synergies. Obviously, a lot of the stuff we do, and we'll get a little bit of background on that here in a sec. But before we dive into the things we collaborate on, overall, I want to give the audience a little bit of an idea of who the heck you are, where you're admittedly a passionate creative. You bring vision to purpose through the lens of cinematic storytelling with businesses, organizations, and you develop content that connects and inspires all through your company, Social Pro Video. Additionally, beyond that, recently you joined my team in ATLVets as a director of media relations, where you really help the passion, purpose-driven community in the veteran space and in the nonprofit space do the same thing, where you're really highlighting that legacy through a lens. And I really am excited to unpack that and all the different things we're collaborating on as a whole. But before we dive into that piece of it, why don't you tell the audience something funny about yourself that we just may not know about you?
Something you may not know. Well, you personally probably know more than I know about me at this point, right? Being the tactical leader, Mr. Zach Knight. But no, I guess one thing that most people don't know, and I never lead with this, kind of a crazy fact. I was a chorus kid. I was a singer growing up in grade school and stuff. So I guess playing into sort of that creative pathway that my life went on, I guess maybe that goes into it, right? Embarrassing fun fact, I was a
That's a
solo
great fact.
vocalist. Yeah.
That's a great fact. Now,
So,
why is that not on LinkedIn? Can we have that like posted somewhere? Do you have any
uh,
videos anywhere?
yeah, maybe not. I don't know. We'll leave that there for now. Little teaser, maybe for the future, right?
I hope not. I hope not. Oh man, so that was growing up, man, and obviously, what you've done over the years is pretty impressive. You've had a few companies. I know you grew up really focusing on audio, video, really editing different things, and kind of were you like a full on DJ? Were you the kid in your room like scratching the record, or were you focused more on other types of audios? Where's your background there?
No, actually, well, initially I got into, this is going to sound really nerdy, like sequencing edits, like soundscapes and ambient sound design and experimenting with synthetic modulation and synthesis and stuff. So really experimentation with sound is how I got into the editing world. And then, of course, as I mentioned, there was those unfortunate times where I was a singer, so I would record myself singing as well. So having all that, literally since I was like 15 years old, I got my first computer with the big cow on the side. I don't even remember, what the name of it was. And I downloaded a program called Fruity Loops. And that's where it all began, man. That's where the big dive into editing and, that real technical curiosity at the time, as it were, really where it's brought me. But
You
yeah,
know, what's funny is you're talking about this, man. There's a comedian, Theo Vaughn, who's freaking hysterical. I don't know if you know who he is, but
no, huh?
oh man, he's got like a mullet and he's kind of a country dude, and he grew up singing in like choir in churches. So you have this guy that's a little bit vulgar with his comedy now, and then he shows these snippets of him like growing up in the church, like singing and like choir tapping, and like, oh man, it was phenomenal. That's what I'm
That's
envisioning as you're
hilarious.
talking.
Yeah.
Terrible, but great all at the same time, man.
Well, unfortunately, the only comedic part about it is when I was actually singing, back in the day. Yeah, no
Man, so
worries.
you started there. You started getting a little bit nerdy about audio, and I know you as that super tech crazy dude. You got to have the good lights, the good camera, the good action. I mean, a lot that you're really focusing on through that higher craft. When you were growing up, is that something that as you moved from the teen years in the professional space, did you maintain that as a job? Did you maintain interest in that, or was it more hobby based?
It was more hobby based. I emancipated myself when I was 15. I had a full-time job at that point. I had to emancipate myself to get a worker's permit, and I quit school. I was working 60 hours a week. So that was really my escape, my outlet, right? As being, kind of living on my own at 15 years old, working 60 hours a week at Dairy Queen of all places, but that was the thing that I've always went back to in my life. That's always interested me. And, we'll get into it a little bit later, I'm sure. But even then, sort of the stuff I was crafting and talking about wasn't just for entertainment purposes. It was things that were personal to me, it was purposeful, even then.
Yeah, no, I have to ask, were you the guy turning the blizzards upside down? Was that a thing back then at Dairy Queen? Oh yeah,
Spoon in and the curl cue on the top and the whole
yeah,
deal. Yeah,
that's
yeah.
awesome, man. I can just see you wearing that hat over there. You have your Social Pro Video hat on as you're scooping ice cream.
Oh my
There's like
God.
so much we're learning about your background, man. I love it. And
Well,
um,
they certainly made me wear a hat. I think I had like blue or green hair at the time, not total
nice.
nonconformist and the whole thing, whatever.
Nice.
But yeah.
Man, I love that. And as you were going up through, I mean, I started working. I moved out at 18, started working. I mean, I think there's a different dynamic back in that day, if you will, where I grew up working. Right, sounds like you grew up working. A little bit different than the youth of today, where it seems like folks aren't really motivated to get out and work and hustle. But sounds like that's been a big piece of your journey into business ownership. When you look all the way back into those early years of work, what was that first leadership position, that first role where you were able to start like leading people or supervising people or recognizing what that leadership impact could be in business?
Well, I guess the first official role was in my early 20s. The thing about me is everything that I've ever done in my entire life, I've taken a leadership role on, as if, even when I was working at the Dairy Queen, I was going to make the best damn peanut butter parfait that anyone could ever have. And I'll never forget, this old 90-year-old lady taught me how to make biscuits. I used to go in at 5 a.m. and learn how to make biscuits with this 90-year-old lady at the Dairy Queen, right? And I'll never forget this man, it was in Northeast Georgia, this big country, just hillbilly type guy. He said, he came back up the counter after I made one of his biscuits one morning. He said, I come here every morning, and that kid in the back with that crazy hair makes the best damn biscuit I ever had. And I'll never forget that. And I was like, cool. He saw beyond, all the BS or whatever, and as being kind of I guess I was sort of a nomad at that time, no real family or anything. That was like the coolest compliment. Someone that saw and respected my work. And I think, through my work has really began my plight into leadership. I always, put forth what I would expect others to put forth for me first and foremost.
I love that, man. And I know in entrepreneurship and business ownership, that's one of those things that is an impact piece, right? As you're taking that type of pride in your work, even from something as simple as making biscuits to making the blizzard that doesn't fall out of the cup, like having that type of work ethic obviously pays really well into everything you're doing with business ownership. And I know you've had a couple different pieces of business, from Social Pro Video to a home inspection company. Talk to us a little bit about that entrepreneurial spirit. Where did that piece come from, where you felt like that business ownership that sounds wonderful to a lot of people, and then all of a sudden we realize the ups and downs attached to it? What got you started as an entrepreneur?
Well, so I was working for a guy who had a couple of businesses for years. And I think I started with him like back in 2007 or 2008. And he was, for all intents and purposes, I would claim him as kind of a early mentor, not only of good things, but of also, what the hell not to do in business, because I learned a lot of mistakes that he made and saw over the years. I was his basically major right hand, in all things operational and marketing within his business as well. All the media stuff. I was the guy that understood that internet stuff, that he certainly didn't have a grasp on at the time. So, yeah, I guess that was the set the foundation, I guess, for me to start my first business. And just going through that and seeing that, and constantly thinking, I think I was within the first 3 years that he was kind of mentoring me. I'd already clicked in my head, like, hey, I'm going to have my own business. I don't know what it's going to be. I don't know what I want to do, but I want to be in business for myself. And as you so eloquently stated, a lot of times it's a lot cooler to say than to actually be in and do, right? So Yeah, started a home inspection business from that because I'm always hyper interested in real estate and that kind of thing. I'm not a salesman, so I never poised myself as ever wanting to have anything to do with being in real estate sales. However, I got into that business because I wanted to be a real estate investor. So that was like me trusting my own eyes. I'm like, okay, I want to learn everything there is to know about, systems, dynamics of a home, the whole deal. So anyway, long story short, I was in that business for over 5 years, successful in the business, but it was still a job. I still didn't feel like a business owner. I'd made some, miscalculations or whatever, and really could not come up with a viable way that I really was impassioned to scale that the way I needed to.
So let's talk about a little bit about those bumps and bruises that we always get along the way, and the real estate world, even the investing, the inspecting side in the last couple of years has been mayhem, I think, to put lightly as a whole. What's one of those things that you recognized early on that was like an obstacle that looking back, it was one of those like, ah, man, you got to overcome it. But there's a really big frustration point, and looking back at it, you thought it was, now you realize there's a great learning opportunity for you.
Well, I'll go back to how I got into the inspection business and decided that was going to be, my full dive into the business world. So my wife and I had bought a brand new construction townhome in Woodstock, Georgia. This was several years ago. And of course, we didn't get an inspection. It's a brand new home, right? Who cares? We don't have to have an inspection. Nothing can be wrong with something that's brand new. Well, wrong. There was plenty wrong with the house. And the challenge was on us as the homeowners because, the subcontractors, the contractors, the builders, the appliance manufacturers, everyone's kicking the ball back and forth. There's no accountability whatsoever. I don't believe in business like that. And it really, frankly, it pissed me off and fired me up to do something about it. So I learned about this little book, that's only about 4 inches thick called the International Residential Code, and started sinking my teeth in, digging in and finding the formulations and different forums of a new industry I did not previously know about called home inspectors. So I started getting information, collecting all this stuff, and sent formalized paperwork. Long story short, they took care of all of our problems, but then our neighbors had issues. I had a little 76-year-old neighbor that came over, and we were talking one day, and she was talking about stuff she was having wrong with her house. And I said, well, you know what I did? Let me help you. So I did that probably 5 times over in that same neighborhood for different neighbors. And I said, okay, I've got something here. These people are actually doing what they should do because of the documentation and all the things that I'm providing to get the ball rolling. And it empowered me. It made me feel good. And I'm like, man, if this happened this much in my own neighborhood, how much is this happening everywhere else? So I set out on a mission. I said, I'm going to change the industry. I'm going to, provide an elevated level of service, and nothing's going to get past me and all this thing. And if you know anything about Georgia real estate market, being the best home inspector in the industry is not exactly going to win you a lot of friends in the real estate business. So long story short, but anyway, and it was really amazing because probably 65% or more of my business was from mouth-to-mouth referrals of previous clients. And I sustained that business for nearly 5 years before I decided to really take a dive into something that I was creatively passionate about as well. So
Yeah, and I think it's an interesting thing to highlight here where you recognize a gap in the market, right? Like the true entrepreneurial spirit and plight is there's a gap in the market and I can fix it, right? No different than why I have so many companies. Like it's one of those, let me start a company because I see an issue here and let's fix it, right? Which can be great, but also, like you said, doesn't necessarily always win you over the friends of people, depending on how you're doing it.
right.
And when you're doing a right job with the integrity attached to it, right? Like I think in real estate, maybe hey, don't notate that one little thing there becomes in the inspection space a little bit
Oh
easier
my
to kind
God.
of grease over it.
I mean, I imagine a lot of people who are in the industry would not be surprised at this,
Yeah.
but you may be amazed at how many, and it never mention names or anything, but how many people I just would not work with or didn't have availability before for, because they had just flat out asked, like, hey, this is the property, we're going to say A, B, C, and D, and we're not going to say E, F, G. And I said, well, that's not my service, you got the wrong guy. Like, it's not going to happen, because my, again, as even in my current business, and even when I'm making the biscuit for that guy, when I'm 15, who probably thought I was the dumbest, on the wrong path kid he'd ever seen in his life, I still wanted to do my duty, my service to clients, and that's what it goes back to. But
Yeah, so you weren't spitting in the biscuits as extra flavor for the
no,
guy.
no, no. I mean, I don't know, man. My whole life, I've always been killing with kindness. Just do good, put good out there, and I believe that good comes back. I mean, I've got, I'm older, and I have no room for any hostilities or anything any longer.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important piece to recognize as you've shifted now. You recognize another gap in the market. You recognize different pieces with social pro video where there's a huge gap of people able to tell their story eloquently, effectively, but beyond that, capturing the story. And I know on Tactical Friday, we're going to talk a little bit about your tips to, as an individual, capture it maybe a little bit better, but as a whole, recognizing there are certain things that people fail at miserably when it comes to capturing the storytelling cinematic quality, where the dirty phone screen or the dirty lens or the shaky what is it, the dang extendo arm thing, the selfie stick, right?
Selfie
Like,
stick, yeah,
so
yeah.
terrible, right? So many things that kind of make you laugh, but you recognize this gap in the market where you felt like you could solve that piece. Tell us a little bit about Social Pro Video. What is the nuts and bolts of the company as a whole?
So lead with passion, lead with purpose. That's what I set out to do with Social Pro Video as well. And I think the biggest thing uh, with Social Pro Videos, that I found that the same things were happening in this market as the real estate market, as other markets. I mean, I've seen individuals, small business owners, entrepreneurs get taken, just basically taken to the cleaners, really taken advantage of, by not to put anyone down, but by frankly others in the video industry, and I didn't like how, I don't like how it's being run. I don't like what people are offering, what they're doing. And I think, again, it goes back to service. Now, couple that with the whole geeked out tech side of, hey, I want the best, greatest visual and auditory representation that I can get, and it's a formula for success, and pile on top of that a third dimension of having something that's purposeful. I mean, whether you're a small business owner, or whether you're a 501c3 founder, whatever it is, I believe everybody does something for a reason, for a purpose. I don't think that someone just sells insurance to sell insurance. There are those out there, but those are not really the ones who are really dug into what they're doing. So, my clients are the ones who understand their passion, their plight, their purpose behind that, and it's my duty to showcase that in a digestible, super high quality format.
And I think that's the piece that I really love about what you're doing, because it's something that we need to highlight attached to digestible piece, because digestible could be in a lot of marketing, video marketing, it could be 30 seconds, 7 seconds, right? But the reality of it is there's so much more to that word of digestible when it comes to especially storytelling. The video, the quality, that piece is amazing, but also being able to recognize like how to craft the story, how to get in front of the camera and say X, Y, and Z, or tell the story eloquently. As veterans, I know a lot of us struggle getting in front of the camera. You yell at me all the time, I need to be on camera more, right? So we struggle getting on camera. But even as small business owners, there's another capacity attached to that, where usually there are two things that people hate the most about owning their own business: sales and marketing. And usually they intermingle the two, and sometimes they kind of cross blend both of that. How do you help the client? How do you help the individual craft that story and then help share it? Obviously, you capture it really well, but how do you help them craft that story?
Well, the strategy goes into the namesake. It's literally storytelling. And that's why I call myself a cinematic storyteller, because I'm sitting down, we're strategizing, generally during the production meeting, right? Before we go out to film and stuff, we're sitting down. And at that point, I know I've gotten to know you well enough through the initial consultation that I have kind of a grasp on your direction where you want to go. So that's the point where we're sitting down and really dissecting, okay, what are the calls to action? What are the pieces? Just like a story, the namesake, the book A book has chapters, a book has sections, has volumes, has segments. Your video should too. Your video should be, and to go back to that term digestible, you should be able to have those pieces of information without being just and unfortunately I've seen it with some other production companies, an hour and a half worth of just technical and facts and figures and these things, and like, oh my God, who, poor guys, I mean, great information, but who the hell is going to sit through all that and listen to that? Even people in the industry, I've seen it in the real estate industry, these lunch and learns, and I'm just cringing. I'm like, man, I really, really like this guy. This is a cool guy. He's a mortgage lender or whatever. But I'm like, please, you gotta give them something that they're going to gravitate towards, because even I imagine educators have it the worst in trying to make learning dynamic and fun and different things for different people, and that kind of thing. And a small part of that storytelling is sort of bringing that education piece into it as well. But yeah, it's got to be digestible, and it's got to be entertaining. It's got to be fun. Without necessarily, and as you mentioned, we'll talk about this later, without being, it's got to be purposeful. In other words, I mean, there's a trick and a thing to all these kids getting millions and millions of views and likes and comments and stuff on their videos, but what the hell are they doing with it? I mean, where does it go? What's the intent? What's the impact? What's the purpose? Here today, gone tomorrow. I mean, it's the way I look at it. But
Yeah, I think that's a great point with the intentionality, right? Recognizing why are you doing all this? And I think a lot of people, and even in the podcasting space, I've seen it where people have like a hobby cast, right? It's not really, for me, this isn't a hobby cast. There is a lot of intentionality and overarching strategy attached to why I have a podcast and why it's at 400 episodes, right? That's where the longevity comes from. And then you think about the storytelling across the years and the way this show's ebbed and flowed and shifted as my life or my businesses have shifted. I think it's a really interesting thing to kind of highlight the longevity of what you're doing in the storytelling format for a company, because we all know, like you go back to 2018, the economy was booming. Then COVID railroaded a lot of people, right? And then coming out of COVID now, a lot of people, the good ones have shifted and survived. A lot of small businesses didn't survive, but you recognize like not to think about what is this video going to be about, right? What is the story I'm telling across? And maybe you don't know the end of the story. Maybe you don't know the final chapter, but in my mind, what you're saying is look at how we can tell the story across the years. Let's not think about what we're doing today or tomorrow. Let's think about where do you want to go long term. Maybe you don't know, you just know the trajectory, and let's tell the story along the way. I imagine that's what captivates an audience, right? The
well,
ebbs, the flows, the good, the bad, the ups, the downs, right?
well, you're exactly right. And it's like the old quote, it's not about the destination, it's about the journey. And highlighting that journey, because that destination, that end goal is going to change, particularly in business. It's going to change. It may change daily in certain industries, right? But leaving that question open-ended, leaving that story open-ended, there doesn't have to be a finite chapter and a close to that. That is really what's going to keep your audience connected and engaged, leaving that question out there, right? So, I mean,
Yeah.
total agreement with that.
Yeah, I love that, man. That's definitely the piece I was gathering from what you're saying, because I think that's huge for people to realize the long-term strategy. If you want to be a business for a long time, you got to think bigger than, I don't know what video to post next week, right? I think that's where you bring in a huge piece of value to the purpose-driven organizations, the small businesses. Beyond that, I'm really curious as you're helping clients with this cinematic storytelling, and you're putting all this into the world, you're putting yourself out there and telling your story. What's the legacy you're wanting to leave on the world with all the amazing stuff you're putting into it?
Well, I think the biggest thing, for me, it goes back to passion and purpose. It goes back to, okay, I'm going to be 40 years old in a couple of years. I'm 38 years old. Poor wife just crossed that milestone. I give her hell about it, but anyway, that's another topic.
Ashley will bleep that out. I swear I didn't do
Yeah,
it.
edited, cut, right. But the biggest legacy I want to leave, and I think that any parent would want to leave, is to instill good values, good ethics, good morals through their contribution in business and society and community, whatever that looks like. And all of the above with Social Pro Video. I'm involved in every bit of that with Social Pro Video. And that just sort of as a visual legacy, so to speak, for my daughter. And that's why it's the legacy through the lens, because it's not just about the legacy of my client or their plight and purpose. It's also this namesake, this company. This is my legacy, to show my daughter what can be achieved, what can be done, particularly with someone who's been in my position in the past, with literally not a place to stay, when I was in my late teens. So that's the intent. That's the why, the purpose behind exactly why I do. I've done everything that I do, but with this in particular, really getting it dialed in and into something that can be my legacy, frankly.
Yeah, I love it. And the cute little Emma monster that terrorizes your
Emphasis
life.
on the monster.
Yeah.
Jeez.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're still trying to figure out who she takes after. We don't really know quite yet. We don't think it's your wife.
We don't either, right? Yeah. She
Um,
certainly, come to think of, we talked about me sort of being a nonconformist, and I would say that she fits that ideology as well
just slightly.
at this point in her life, right? So
Oh man, no, Nate, I love it, man. It's amazing. There's huge impact attached to what you're doing. I love seeing it. If somebody wants to reach out to you and connect with you, find out more, and really see how they can work with you attached to creating their story, what's the best way to reach out and connect with you?
one of the greatest ways to get in contact with me in the social space is through LinkedIn, obviously. But I'm always open. I have a calendar that's linked onto my website, socialprovideo.com. And I'm always up for having a conversation with people, even if it's your fact finding mission for me and what I do in terms of storytelling. Even if you just want some advice, some information, I'm that guy. We'll have a 20-minute conversation where it's about you. Let me help you.
Yeah, I love it. I definitely encourage everybody to reach out, connect with Nate. Obviously, we'll have all that in the show notes. I think there's an amazing thing you'll see on the website. You'll see me there, obviously, attached to some of the work we've done together.
He's
But
a little further down the page, but
way
yeah,
down
yeah.
as I'm like
He's
scrolling and I'm like, man, I'm way down the page. But there's some amazing stuff that you've done on the website where you can really see that cinematic storytelling piece. And I really encourage everybody to reach out, check it out, but also come back this Friday where we're going to dive into some of the tactics attached to more storytelling and in that cinematic quality. And overall, Nate, I appreciate you coming on today, my friend.
Hey, Zach, thanks for having me, man. This has been fun. It's been a good time.